All right, everyone. It is now 10 o'clock. Good morning. I am Aaron Blumberg, Swiftwind's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Collection Development Basics. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Maureen McCrory. Maureen McCrory has an MLIS and a PhD. She was also a catalog librarian and reference librarian at Oberlin College from 1995 to 2000 and has been a technical services librarian at Hillsdale College for the past 16 years. Her responsibilities at Hillsdale for all those years have included the supervision of acquisitions, collection development, and cataloging of all monographic and AV material, as well as the management of the library's innovative ILS system. On her time off from Hillsdale, Maureen teaches a course in knowledge organization online for Dominican University. Please welcome Maureen and enjoy her webinar this morning. Maureen?
Thanks very much, Aaron. Can you hear me okay, Aaron? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to do this. As Aaron said, I do collection development, and I have here at Hillsdale for almost 17 years now. Uh, I took a course in collection development as part of my MLS course in the early 90s, and then didn't do much with it for my first professional position. And so when I started this job in 2000, I kind of had to learn by doing. I was pulling back into the recesses of my brain for what I'd learned in that collection development course. But by 2000, things had started to change. The internet had had become a thing. You could buy books online, and that was becoming more and more. So what I learned about collection development, I learned partly from that course, but mostly from doing it and from advice from my predecessor, who's now our library director. So I want to present this webinar today as kind of my take on collection development. It is definitely going to be coming from the point of view of someone working in a small liberal arts college, but I'm going to try to incorporate some of what I think, how what I know about collection development from this position can apply in every library. Please feel free to ask questions by chatting throughout the presentation. I'll try to answer them as we go, and I'll also try to leave some time at the end for questions, but feel free to type whatever comes to your mind as we go through it. And so we'll get started. Let's see. There we go. So the goals for this webinar, this is kind of outlined in the course description, but I want to identify the voices that need to be heard when you're making collection development decisions. Who do you need to listen to? Who do you need to consider when you're deciding what to add to your collection? Want to also examine the other considerations that you have to make when you're making these decisions. What other things you have to think about in addition to the people and the voices that need to be heard? What other things do you need to consider? Want to consider the use of collection development policies. My take on collection development policies is definitely reflective of what we do here at Hillsdale, and it's slightly different from what you will hear in similar presentations. We'll get into that. I want to list the sources of material that I would use at all budget levels. I've been in this position long enough that I've seen a variety of budget situations. We've had times when we had next to no money to spend and times when we had a very, very healthy budget and kind of needed to seek out materials to add to the collection to spend that money that been given. Of course, at a private institution, we have a little bit more leeway and a little bit more fluctuation of those budgets, but I've kind of seen it all. So I hope I can shed some light on how you can work with various budgets. And then I also want to discuss the methods for ensuring a balanced collection that meets the needs of your particular library. I have just one slide really that addresses this, but I think all of what you do doing collection development, you need to keep in mind that your collection, any collection that you have, should represent a variety of viewpoints. Whether or not your users have a variety of viewpoints, the collection that you develop needs to bring other voices into it needs to represent other voices. So I want to do a quick poll here and see if I can remember how to do this. I want to know what type of library you represent. So let's see, polls. Okay, so here's our poll. Can people see the poll? Oh, there we go. They must be able to because I'm getting answers. So I wondered what kind of library you represent. And this is probably just about everything. So most people are from public libraries, a few public, a few school, and a few special. Great. Okay. So the majority public, and this is beyond my experience. I've always worked in academic libraries, just kind of the way my career worked. But I do think, as I said, I think what I do at an academic library, there's a lot that applies to public libraries too. So might keep that in mind as I go through this. Now, how do I get rid of the poll, Erin? I think I hide it. All right, there we go. Thank you very much. That will be helpful as we go through this. Now, if you are in an academic library, and a couple of you said that you are, the people that you need to listen to, the constituents that will have some input in the decisions you make regarding collection development include the faculty. In my opinion, the faculty is the main group of users that you're serving as you develop a collection in an academic library. They are responsible for guiding the curriculum, and so they know what resources would support that activity. But your students too, your students may have different needs than the faculty may see. The faculty have given them assignments and suggested readings, but the students may want to supplement that with additional reading. And so the students can be an important voice as well. Making yourself available to student suggestions can be an important part of collection development in an academic library. Administrators have their own thoughts of what a library collection should be. Part of the process of collection development includes discussing with administrators what they think the collection needs to be, but also sharing with them your vision of the collection too, partly for budgetary purposes, but also just to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the institution. Donors are always voices that have to be acknowledged and have to be listened to. You have to take into account the people that are donating both materials and funds, what their needs and what their visions are. It doesn't necessarily mean your collection development has to be guided by those people's opinions, but it is certainly something to consider as you're developing a collection. And then the library staff too, and the staff of the institution as a whole might have very good thoughts about how a collection needs to be developed to fully serve the community. In a public library, you have similar constituents. Your users, the members of your community certainly are the main group that you need to serve with your collection development. And you need to get input from your users as to what they need and what they want in your collection, what they want to read and to see and to use. And there are various ways to get that feedback. I think I have a slide coming up with some suggestions, but I would say definitely hearing what your users need and want is number one. Your board, the library board, is definitely going to be someone you have to listen to and have to take into consideration. Again, as with donors, talking with your board and with your administrators is very important. They might have ideas that you can discuss and maybe you can kind of shape their thinking a little bit of what a collection should be. But you also need to take into account their feelings about how a collection should be developed. Administrators, again, in a public library, similar to an academic library, and donors too. In a public library, you may have a lot more donations of materials than you really can use. But understanding what donors want to give and why they want to give certain materials or certain funds for certain projects, understanding what their needs and wishes are for a collection. And then again, the library staff can be a very valuable source and an important source of thoughts on how a collection should grow. And in a school library, I think there were a few school librarians, similar to an academic library, where the faculty are the main voice to listen to. I think the teachers in a school library are the main voice to listen to. They know what students need, and I really see a school librarian as a partner with the teachers in facilitating literacy and in supporting the curriculum that the teachers are working with. So your teachers are certainly the people you need to talk to first when you're developing a collection in the school library. The students too, staying in touch with the students and knowing what they're interested in, what they're seeing maybe in social media, in media in general, how your collection can support what they're seeing in their daily lives, in addition to what they're learning in the classroom. Parents certainly have to be considered. Working with parents as a school librarian is something that I know is a challenge, but something that has to be considered. And when you make a selection in a school library, I think that considering, just remembering how parents are going to react and being prepared to talk with parents about the selections you've made is important, and taking their thoughts too in what you should be collecting. Uh, Administrators, again, always important. Know what they feel that you need for the library and what their thoughts are, and the board, of course, the source of the money. They have to be considered when you're deciding what to buy and to accept as gifts. And then in a special library, and I noticed there were a few special library representatives too. It's very, very similar. You probably are a smaller library, but you still, the people that use your library, the people that you need to serve, that's who you need to talk with when you're making collection development plans and decisions. The administrators of the institution that your library serves have a vision for the library, and they need to be considered. And then again, if there's a board overseeing the institution, those voices need to be heard as well. But then in addition to all of these people that you need to consider when you're making collection development decisions, you also need to look at specific items and make decisions based on the item. Does the item you're considering for your collection really fit within the existing guidelines? This might be a collection development policy. Most libraries do have a collection development policy that whatever you select or accept for your collection needs to fit that policy. If your library has a mission statement, and again, most libraries do, you need to know that mission and to be able to say, yes, this item that I'm selecting for this collection does support the mission, and the collection as a whole supports the mission of the library and also of the institution. The institution's mission needs to be considered as well. Your budget, of course, has to be considered. Can you afford the item that you're considering? Is it in line with the budget as a whole? Can you really afford what you're considering? And does the potential use justify the cost? This is not a hard and fast rule, and especially in academic libraries. There are some materials that you just need to have, even if there is only one person that will use it. They might be an item that is representative of a particular part of scholarship that the collection just has to have to support a particular curriculum. But you need to make sure that you're not going to buy something that nobody will ever use and that really isn't needed, especially if it's expensive. Will other materials be needed to balance the viewpoints represented by the item? So if you're purchasing one video, say, on a particular topic, are there other materials that you'll need to support that particular video? Is that going to bring up other questions that your users might have? Will you need supporting materials? And then will additional shelving or equipment be needed to provide for the storage or use of the item? This is kind of a big one that I have to continually remind myself, do we really have space to shelve this, especially with gifts? Can we really accept this gift and be able to use it? Yeah, it's free, but maybe we don't have space, or we don't have the correct type of space for housing the particular item that we're considering. So that's a big type of consideration that sometimes is forgotten on the collection development end. All right, so I have another poll here, and let's go ahead and do this. So this is the collection development question. Does your library have a collection development policy, or do you not know? So yeah, vast majority have a collection development policy. Very good, yeah. It's just as I suspected, that most libraries do have a collection development policy, and nobody said no, we don't. At Hillsdale College, actually, we don't currently have a collection development policy. There was one written. Oh, good. Still developing it. Yeah, we actually were in that position at Hillsdale College when I first started here. We were developing a collection development policy, and it was kind of always on my list of to do things for my goals at the end of the year. I got to work on that collection development policy. But as the years went by, my director and I started to realize that in a way, not having one gave us more flexibility. We're supporting the college's mission. We have a library mission statement as well. And so we've really relied on those to guide our collection development. And for the time being, we've kind of decided that not having a policy might be the best for us, at least currently. It's something that we continue to discuss. But for most libraries, having a collection development policy is going to be essential and might even be required by guidelines at your institution. Because collection development policies can help guide decisions. If they do exist, if you do have a collection development policy, you have to follow it. You need to strictly follow it. You need to review it regularly to make sure it's still relevant and make changes to it in whatever process is necessary at your institution to make sure that it continues to be applicable to your situation. But collection development policies can be restricted if they're meant to be restrictive, but they can also in some ways restrict you more than you might want in your development of your collection. Mission statements, as I said, at Hillsdale College, we substitute a collection development policy with a mission statement. A collection development should always support the library's mission, and the library's mission in turn should support the institution's mission. All selections should support the mission of the institution, whether or not there's a collection development policy. And that's kind of this hierarchy of everything you do should support your institution's mission. Your library's mission should support the institution's mission, and everything you purchase for your collection should support that library mission. So all of this, whether or not it's written, knowing what those institutional policies and institutional philosophies are is very important in collection development. And everyone making final decisions regarding collection development should be familiar with all of these policies, with all of these documents, with all of these philosophies, whether or not they're written. At Hillsdale, we try to make sure that the institution's mission is understood by every employee. And in the library, we try to carry that through with the library's mission as well, so that we all know what we're about, what our goals are. Any questions about collection development policies before I move on? As I say, please feel free to ask questions as I move through this, and I will try to keep an eye on them. I'll go ahead, but I can always go back too if you have questions. So now I'm going to get into some sources for material. Where do you buy material? And this is kind of based on what I do. We buy most of our material at the college through Emory Pratt, which is a Michigan company, a fairly small book jobber or book vendor. They specialize in providing books to libraries. There are a lot of companies like that. Follett, which bought Baker and Taylor not too long ago. Midwest is mostly an academic book supplier. They're kind of small, like Emory Pratt. We buy our standing order materials actually through Midwest, and our firm orders through Emory Pratt. So we use two vendors, which is very common. Most libraries do not stick with just one vendor exclusively. We also have looked at Ingram Library Services, and there are a lot of others, especially in public and school libraries. If any of you have suggestions, feel free to add them in the chat. These are just kind of the book vendors I know of, but feel free to add some in chat because I'd love to hear the names of other companies that you're using and that you know about. And then Amazon, we use Amazon quite a bit, especially when we need something immediately. The book jobbers, the book vendors can usually provide things quickly, but it tends to be more expensive. I make use of Amazon because they are so quick and they have such a big inventory. Sometimes that is the best service to our users. Um, even if we're supporting this giant conglomerate, it provides good service. And so I have no problem personally using Amazon when it's appropriate to get something overnight for not too much more than we would pay through the book jobbers. We do have a Prime membership at the library, which pays for itself pretty quickly when we're buying these things quickly. Right, Brodart and Midwest Audio and Video. Yes, thank you, Mary. Yeah, those are good ones. And Gobi Services. And Gobi is somehow related to Follett, aren't they? I was thinking they were a subsidiary, maybe. I can't. They're associated with one of the big names somehow. Um, Uh, the problem with Amazon, I found we use a credit card now for Amazon, but we did use the corporate credit with Amazon for a while. We found the billing a little bit difficult for libraries. It's not really set up for libraries, whereas somebody like Follett or Midwest is set up for libraries. Oh, and EBSCO too, yes, for especially for serials materials, we use EBSCO. So yeah, a lot of vendors out there. Kind of thing that talking with other libraries is really the best source of information. Talking with other libraries of your size and in your region can give you an idea of what vendors are going to be best for your particular collection. Thanks for those suggestions, by the way. Sources for materials that are cheap. Oh, and Gale Cengage for large print. Excellent. And that's not something we serve at an academic library. We don't have a demand for large print materials, and so it's something I've never had to deal with. But that's good to know that Gale can provide that. When I'm looking for something really cheap, and this is the kind of selection I do when we're low on funds or for some reason the budget has been cut, if I need materials, I go to these kind of secondary markets. The Amazon Marketplace can sometimes provide what you need for a greatly reduced cost. These are independent booksellers using Amazon as a middleman. ABE Books, and I think actually this link redirects to something called ABE Books, but ABE.com works. Again, independent booksellers selling through this platform. Very good service. We've had a lot of luck finding used materials and remaindered materials through ABE. eBay sometimes is a good source if you just can't find what you need. If you need a particular edition of an obscure title, eBay is sometimes your only recourse, the only place to go. eBay, you know probably from personal use, you have to be careful, read very carefully what the vendor's policies are, the seller's policies are, but eBay can be a good source of materials. And then there are becoming more and more free ebooks. If you do not have material, a budget for material currently, and you want to add titles to your collection, adding links to free resources in your catalog is something that we've done quite a bit at Hillsdale. We have added all of the records for the HathiTrust public domain titles to our library catalog. The Google Books too. Occasionally we will add links from our library catalog to these free resources so we can serve our patrons better. Searching for something in the catalog, maybe we don't have a printed copy of something, but there might be a free resource out there that will work. And then gifts. Gifts are a good source for cheap material, but gifts come with their own problems. But they certainly are cheap in terms of acquisition. Gifts can help you develop a collection beyond what your budget may really allow, but they're not free. They're free to bring them into the library, but they still have to be selected. You still have to go through these gifts and decide what you really can use, what's in decent shape, what doesn't have mold. Mold's a big thing. Mold and insect damage is a big thing with gifts. Once you've decided you are going to accept a gift, you need to formally acknowledge it. You're going to have to process it, and you're going to have to shelve it. And so all of those things have to be considered when you're looking at a possible acceptance of a donation. You do need to make that acceptance possible and to make it work smoothly. You have to have an established policy of some sort for gifts, whether or not that policy is written. Because you are going to sometimes have to decline gifts that will not be useful. You, in most cases, will not be able to take every gift unless you are able to tell your donors that you will accept the gift only with no strings attached, if you are allowed to do whatever you think is best with that gift. And that's basically what we do at Hillsdale College. We accept gifts with the understanding that we might give those things away. We might throw them away if they're damaged materials. And so our donors know that up front when we accept gifts. We generally, though, try not to accept gifts of material that we would not pay for. We don't add gifts to the collection if they're not materials that we would pay for if we had the funds available. And if we do accept a gift, we have to be honest about what we will do with it. And so we do, again, say upfront that we might get rid of things. We might give these gifts away to our student population if they're not things that we can use in the library. All right, I think this is our final poll. I want to see which of the following describes your library in terms of budget. Let's see, bring the poll up. So do you usually have trouble spending all of your budgeted funds? Or do you seldom have enough money to buy everything that your users need? Or do you not know? Do you not know how well your budget fits your need? So, okay, yeah, and this too, I think this is probably typical of public libraries. Since we have mostly public libraries represented, you usually don't have enough money for everything that your public wants and needs. And not knowing too, I certainly was not sure when I started in my position here how well the budget was really going to fit what was needed. And it's varied too. It's varied year to year. Some years we have more money than we really absolutely need, and some years we don't have enough. So thank you. That helps. So you do, when you're deciding what to purchase or what to accept as gifts, you have to keep your budget in mind at all times. You have to know the specifics of budgeting at your institution. Do you need to spend your entire budget within the year, or will your funds carry over? This is a key point that you have to keep in mind all the time. Am I trying to spend a lot of money, or can I just buy what I need and not worry about having money left over? Is there an institutional incentive to spend the full budget, or is there more of an incentive to conserve it? Different institutions have different needs. I would say usually with a public library, you need to conserve to some extent, but you might need to spend the full budget that you are given, so you need to spend that wisely. You need to find a way to track current expenditures and encumbrances. Most of you probably already have this. You might have it through your ILS. We have an innovative interfaces system at Hillsdale, and we can see this information for individual funds at a moment's notice. There's a web page we can go to that shows how much has been spent out of each fund, how much is encumbered, and how much has actually been paid out. Our institution, too, has those numbers. They vary a little bit from what the library system shows, because the the two systems at Hillsdale are not connected, and so the information that the institution has is slightly older, or it's a little bit behind from what the library's information says. Book vendors too, and Emory Pratt, I mentioned we use for most of our book purchases. They can tell us how much we've spent in the year for a particular fund, but the format that they provide isn't always the most helpful for us. And I've found that with other vendors too. Amazon can show me what I've bought, but it might not be in a format that I can really use. Blythe, we've been with Innovative since 1995 at Hillsdale. I've been here since 2000, but the institution I worked at before was Innovative as well. So I've been using Innovative for a couple of decades. I haven't had exposure to a whole lot of other library systems, actually, as a result of that. And you also have to remember that the purchase of item, purchase price, similar to a gift not being completely free, the purchase price of an item is not its only cost. And yes, Blythe, feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. Yeah, so everything you bring into your library is going to have a cost of some sort, and you have to keep that in mind. Figuring out what to spend or when to spend what. And this goes back partly to that knowing how your budget has to be spent, but you also have to keep your users and their schedules in mind. In academic library, we have to purchase more in the summer and in the late fall in order to prepare for the upcoming semesters. Public libraries, and this is kind of an assumption on my part since I've never actually worked in a public library, but I would think you would probably need to spend more in spring in order to prepare for summer reading programs, especially in your children's and young adults areas. And even in AV materials, you probably have more use in the summer, I'm guessing. If anybody wants to chime in on how that cycle works in public libraries. But you have to keep all of that in mind when you're deciding what to spend and when to spend it. School libraries, again, probably need to prepare for those cycles of coursework, of curriculum. Probably need to buy a lot of material to prepare for the fall classes. You probably should save some of your budget for last minute purchases if at all possible, but you also need to be prepared if you need to spend out your budget at the end of the year. Okay, yeah, snowbird season, very good point, Katie, especially you all in Florida. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, you've got a lot of Michigan people going down there that are going to be reading a lot in the winter. That's a very good point. And so, yeah, you need to know that. You need to know that we're going to have this influx of snowbirds coming into our library in the winter, and we need to be prepared for that level of circulation. So I have these two statements down here after this second bullet point. You need to keep a wish list of titles to purchase when money needs to be spent, and another wish list of titles to purchase when money is available. And so I read these and thought, now, those sound like exactly the same thing. But what I mean by that is that ideally having a wish list of titles that are just kind of nice to have, things that if you have extra money, these would be great to have. They're not essential purchases, but it would be really nice to have them. So having a list like that, a true wish list. But then also a list of titles that you can't purchase right now, but you really need to purchase. A list of, as soon as money is available, we have to buy these things. So sort of two lists, a really need list and a would be nice to have list. Those are the two differences there that in my opinion, are probably good to maintain in a library. And this is for all kinds of material. Our serials librarian keeps physical spreadsheets of these types updated on a regular basis. My method is much more, much looser. I mostly just keep emails regarding kind of wish list purchases and refer to my email. So many ways to do that, but having those things in mind is an important part of collection development. You will sometimes have to ask for more money to support your collection development. I would say that the first thing to do when you're thinking of asking for more money is to be aware of the cost increases. So know how much money you need to maintain the level of collection development that you currently have based on inflation. So there are a lot of resources for finding this. Just knowing inflation rates is helpful, but specific to library purchases, the Library Materials Price Index is a key tool for this explicit purpose. This is published by Alex in the Library and Book Trade Almanac, but you can get previous year's issues available for free from the website linked here on the ALA site. Very helpful. Even if you're not able to get the most recent year, you can see trends from these numbers. Very, very helpful information. School Library Journal publishes price information every spring, and this is a very short, quick, easy to read article. Mostly, of course, applies to school library purchases, but would be helpful for anyone that purchases young adult material. And Choice Magazine for academic libraries does publish a article about college book prices on a regular basis, and that's a subscription resource, but if you're at an academic library, you probably have access to that. More about asking for more money, you need to know how your material is used, and so this involves keeping track of usage statistics. Your ILS will provide most likely will provide circulation and internal use counts. The Innovative system does, and Innovative has some features that a lot of other systems don't have, but I think most library systems would provide this kind of information. Your vendor can, for electronic resources, can provide statistics, and so keeping up with the sushi data, for instance, or counter data that's provided by your electronic resources vendors can be helpful, give you an idea of how well your material is being used. And then internal counts of periodical use need to be maintained so that you know what's actually being used. If you have a subscription to something that's never being taken off the shelf, you need to know that and maybe reconsider that acquisition. You need to be aware also, though, of potential use. So this goes back to knowing at an academic library, you need to know what's being taught. That will give you an idea of how something might be used. In your public library, knowing your community, knowing what your users do, what the makeup, the demographics of your users are, what they're likely to be interested in and to need, knowing what their potential needs as well as their current needs, and so staying in touch with local news, even what's going on in your community and how is your community changing and growing and developing will have a big impact on how you want your collection to develop. You need to be able, kind of bottom line, you need to be able to defend your current expenditures as well as your future expenditures, and you need to have specific figures available for needed increases. You need to know how much more money you will need to continue to meet the needs of your community. And if you're not currently able to meet the needs of your community, you need to have the numbers to show how much more you would need and why you would need that money. When you don't have enough money, which is the case for most of us, there are ways to stretch your library's budget, your collection development budget. I buy a lot of used and remaindered materials, again, on Amazon Marketplace and ABE. Bookfinder is an excellent resource if you're trying to find a particular edition and are not having much luck kind of on the open web. Bookfinder allows you to search by very specific book criteria, and it's a meta resource, and we'll find things that are in Amazon and in ABE and on other websites. When you do use these rare book and used book vendors, you have to be very, very careful with how the descriptions are presented and how you read those descriptions. And this is something that you kind of learn as you go through it. Very good condition I found with many of these dealers does not necessarily mean what I would call very good. There frequently are previous library owner stamps on some of these materials. You have to be prepared to return materials that you're not going to be able to use if you go this route of buying through used dealers, if you're able to. And this all, yeah, customer reviews can be helpful, although I've learned to take those with a grain of salt as well, because some of the some of the customer reviews are not truly customer reviews. And Amazon has some ways to show who really is a customer, but those can sometimes be stacked in one direction or the other by various sellers. But yeah, I do read the customer reviews definitely just to get an idea of what things are like. Um, at Hillsdale, we started in kind of the first, in 2002, I guess, when our budget first kind of took a big hit after 9/11, actually. We decided we would always buy paperbacks. If paperbacks were available for a title that we needed, we kind of went to a default. We had always bought hardbacks previously. Academic libraries typically did that. But we were finding that paperbacks that we had professionally bound before they even entered the library actually held up as well, and sometimes even better than the hardback versions, and would save us quite a bit of money. For academic titles, the difference between a paperback and a hardback can be huge. It can be 60% less to buy a paperback. And so that has saved us a lot and really stretched our budget. We have all of them bound before we even receive them. Emory Pratt receives the titles we've ordered and sends them immediately to a binder. We had the same setup with the Book House, which was a local Michigan book jobber that went out of business a couple years ago. But they received the books we ordered and sent them to the binder before we even got them. And so it was basically like getting a hardbound book, but at a fraction, in many cases, of the price. You can set up a process like this directly with a binder, but you frequently would have to send a big bunch of paperbacks. We've explored that in the past when we've considered switching vendors, but having the vendor do it is much easier and saves us quite a bit of money. We also, I should mention, we have comb bound or spiral bound materials are very, very hard to shelve and do not circulate well, at least in academic libraries, and I would think even more maybe in public libraries. We started years ago asking the binder to just cut off those combs and those spirals and bind those books with the holes intact, so you don't lose the margin of the book. You just have them cut off the comb and bind it as if the holes weren't there, but bind it with the holes so you have that margin. That's worked really well for music material especially. Just thought I'd mention that. It's been a real help in developing our collection. So meeting user needs, I've been mentioning this throughout this presentation, that you need to know your users. You need to go out and meet your users and spend time with them, whether it's in the stacks or at events your library is sponsoring, even at other events in your community or at your institution. Get to know the people that you're serving with your collection. It will help you to develop the collection in the way that it needs to be developed. If you're responsible for collection development, make sure people know who you are and that you are the person responsible. Make sure that they know how to contact you to let you know what their needs are. My contact information is online, and we have posters in the library that say what the various librarians do. I always try to meet with new faculty. This is an academic library thing. When new faculty come to the college, we have an orientation, and I make sure that I'm always at that meeting so that I can tell them I'm here to support your curriculum and to acquire the materials that you need. In a public library, the same kind of thing works. Be sure you know who you're serving and what their needs are. You can take surveys if that's appropriate and if that's acceptable to your institution. Whether paper surveys or online surveys, get to know what your users need and want. You do need to regularly review your holdings for gaps and for areas to be weeded. I'm not really addressing weeding too much today in this presentation. I consider that more of a collection management function. But when you look at your collection and you see that things are missing, that's an area for development. maybe for weeding too, but also for development. Some materials you don't want to keep indefinitely. You don't have to keep indefinitely. They might be obsolete format or information. So if you are doing some weeding, you might also need to be doing some acquisition, some development of the collection. And your users' needs change, and so your collection may need to change. You may need to start buying more material in one area and less in another, depending on the change in your user population. And this is where I'm trying to address developing a balanced collection. There are many considerations for developing a balanced collection, but I think one thing we always have to keep in mind, no matter what type of library we serve, no matter what type of um, user population we're working with, we have to identify our own biases. We have to know what we're likely to consider useful and needed ourselves, and step out of that box of what we think is useful and important, and see what our users think need and think is important. So, we all have biases. I have my own cultural and religious and generational biases. I have to constantly be aware of those, and keep in mind that my feelings may not be the feelings of the majority of my users. And that certainly is the case at the college I work at. If any of you know about Hillsdale College, I work at a college that has some different viewpoints from what I might have always had. And so I've had to kind of step outside of my own box and realize what my users need and how that differs from what I need. You have to accept that you're going to have to fight some of your own biases in order to develop a balanced collection. I think my biases in a way are useful. I can make the collection balanced in a way that it might not be if the person in my position fell in line with everything that the majority of the population at Hillsdale thought. Our collection would not be as biased. And so my biases have some use at this institution. I think that's going to be true in any situation, that your own biases can be useful, but you have to be aware of them. I would say don't be afraid to seek the advice of others if you suspect that your decisions may be influenced by your biases. If I have something I think, well, maybe this is just something I want to read, I might go to one of my colleagues who has a different point of view and say, is this something that other people at this institution might be interested in, might be able to use as well, or is it just me? And I would say understand that what may constitute bias in situation may constitute service to users in another. And this is kind of the same idea of the things that I am biased towards in a way can be helpful to keep this collection biased, or keep this collection balanced. And so I would say use those biases, but definitely be aware of them and fight against letting them overtake your decisions. Be willing to think differently. Be willing to think as all of your constituents do, as all of your users do, not just as one group of them do. So this is my last major slide, I believe. If you want more information on all of this, there's a 4-week ALA course that looks very, very good. I haven't taken it myself, but it's put together by ALA, and it has a lot of experienced librarians contributing to it. There's information on the ALA website for that. It is not free, which is something to keep in mind. But if you're interested, that does look like a very good course. There's a textbook that I believe actually supports that same course. That's in its 3rd edition now. That's available on the ALA site as well. There's also a professional resources page on the ALA site that has a lot of good information for collection development, has a lot of links to interest groups with listservs and wikis. I was thinking of trying to share my screen. I think I'm going to try to do that. So bear with me for a minute. I'm going to see if this works, because there's a lot out there on the open web. Let's see if this works. Share my screen. All right, can somebody type yes if they can still hear me? Excellent. Okay, thank you. So I have all these choices. I'm going to try to share my Google. Um, okay, it looks like I'm still talking to you. I just did a Google search on collection development basics, and I just did this the other day after I'd already put together my slides and realized there are a lot of courses like this, and some of them are free. This Rails, Beyond the Basics Rails, is a 1 hour presentation that is free online. I believe it's this YouTube link, in fact. You can see the whole presentation, and it's really good. In fact, watching that, I realized that I really didn't talk too much about where you can find materials to buy, where you get review sources. And so I'm going to go into that a little bit. But that's a really good presentation. It's by a library journal editor, I believe. And this ABLE presentation, this is actually kind of a course, a 1 hour course you can go through, and you can answer questions. And take this little course, and it's really helpful. It has a lot of the same information. I highly recommend it. I'm going to go back to the, let's see, I can't do that. Let's see. I hope you can still see this. This is our mission, library mission I was talking about. I just thought I'd show that. Where do you find materials? I try to only select material that has review information. Unless somebody has requested it, a faculty member or a student has requested something in particular, I always try to find review information. So our librarians at Hillsdale review Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and Booklist on a regular basis. We review those materials weekly to see what's new and what might be applicable to our collection. We also use Choice Magazine, very specific to academic libraries, but very useful. So I'm going to come back to the site here. Stop sharing. Okay, I think I'm back. Let's see, I have to, I think I need to go to a different share. Share, there we go. I think we're back. All right. Um, let's see, let me know. Can people hear me? I think we're back to the presentation. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So that is all I have. So we have some time for questions. So we have one. Mimi has one. My library administrator wants us to order 90 days out, but there aren't a lot of reviews out on things for that far out. Any ideas on where else to find reviews that early? Well, Amazon actually is an excellent source. Published reviews, kind of professional reviews, are sometimes listed on the Amazon site. Some publishers will include outside reviews on their pre-publication information. I would say on the open web, just search by ISBN or by title and see what's being mentioned about the material you're looking at ahead of its publication. Because there definitely are. Academic titles get a lot of pre-publication review, and so it's not so hard for academic titles. For popular titles, yeah, I would do a Google search. That probably is the easiest way to do that. But and sometimes you have to just rely on knowledge of the author and of the publisher, and to know that those are reliable authors and publishers. Maybe look at reviews from other publications from those creators, and see kind of whether or not they're publishing things that would be of interest, and then that might be able to inform your decision about something that doesn't have a review yet. I've done that kind of thing, especially if someone has suggested, especially if a student has suggested material for our library and I don't know anything about the author or the publisher. I've gone out on the web to find information, even if there's not a review of the thing that's being suggested, that I might be able to find review information about similar things, about things that that author has published or about things that that publisher has put out. Yes, Jody, you raised your hand. Do you have a question? Go ahead and type it in chat. Oh, okay. No problem. Any other questions that anybody has? Anything you want me to go out on the web for. That's, like I said, I kind of realized as I was looking at these similar presentations that I didn't talk too much about where to find material. And I realized that that really is because right now at our library, I have so many faculty recommending materials that our budget gets spent just based on faculty suggestions and recommendations, and on librarian, because the librarians do go through those review sources on a regular basis. I actually have the New York Review of Books sitting on my desk. I like that publication, and I read through it and purchase most of what is reviewed in that publication. To balance that, though, I also read the Claremont Review of Books, which is kind of the same thing, but from a more conservative viewpoint, a politically conservative viewpoint. And so to balance what's in the New York Review of Books, I read this other publication that is similar but from a different viewpoint and select materials from that as well. Um, and that, again, that is knowing my own bias of thinking what's in the New York Review of Books is very good. I know that I need to look elsewhere to balance that, the viewpoints I'm getting there. So I am perfectly willing to take questions offline. If you think of something, feel free to contact me at any time. I have no problem with answering questions and sharing more of what I do, how I do collection development, and having a further discussion with it with any of you following this. But thank you very much for your time. Yes, and they'll be sending out a PDF version. So
And
thank you,
thank you,
Erin. Thank
Maureen,
you,
for a
everybody.
wonderful webinar. Some information and a sneak peek of what is coming up. Attendees, if you enjoyed this webinar, please join us next month on July 19th, where Maureen will be presenting on accidental systems librarianship. We also encourage you to register for next Tuesday's DigiRef Academy. You can get there from here, beginning research in hospitality. And next Friday, June 16th, Accessibility Points, S is for Special Needs. As always, please keep an eye out for your emails from myself if you're on the Swiftland distribution list, or from the Florida Library listserv, or you can check our Swiftland Facebook, or look at the Florida Library training calendar. As always, thank you for attending and have a terrific day.